if there's anyone here for the public hearing who wishes to speak, there's a sign-up sheet, so be sure you sign up over there. Then the regular council meeting sign-up sheets over there also.
Test. Test.
I will call to order City of Mauldin Council meeting for July the 17th, 2023 at 7 PM. A little bit different tonight. The first item on our agenda before us will be a public hearing on an ordinance to establish a sewer pump station fee for additional parcels at Indigo Point. With that being said, I will recognize our city administrator, Mr. Seth Duncan, for an overview of our public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, sir. Tonight, council will hold a public hearing tonight, July 17th, 2023, regarding the establishment of a pump station fee on additional parcels at Indigo Point subdivision. In 2020, Mauldin City Council established an ordinance to assess a fee on an annual basis to develop parcels contained within the Indigo Point subdivision for the purposes of maintaining certain sewer capital improvements, including a sewer pump station. Final development plan of the subdivision will consist of 223 detached single-family lots and 92 townhome lots. The initial fee was set at $135 fiscal year 2021, then lowered to $100 in FY 21-22 and $73 in FY 22-23. In addition, an additional 93 lots have now been developed and need to be included within the ordinance. Prior to establishing a fee, City Council must hold a public hearing.
Thank you, sir. At this time, we will open the floor for comments that would be addressed to council. That anyone that has signed up, no one has signed up. So is there anyone via Zoom that would be interested in the public hearing comment? Just us right now. Okay, hearing none, I would suggest that we consider ourselves at 7:02 adjourned from the public hearing. All right. We will move directly now into our regular scheduled council meeting agenda. Let the records reflect, which I forgot to do a second ago, that all council members are present, along with myself. Our city clerk, Miss Cindy Miller, who keeps us all straight and narrow, along with our city administrator, Mr. Seth Duncan, and our legal counsel, Mr. John Dugan, is joining us again today. So we're glad to have John back in good health, I hope.
Oh, yeah.
So glad he's here. We appreciate that, along with various department heads that in the audience. We appreciate y'all being here as we conduct the city's business. That being said, next item on our agenda is our invocation and pledge of allegiance, and I believe Mr. Matney.
Thank you, Mayor. I would invite anybody who would like to please join me in prayer. Gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for the opportunity to get together this evening. I know that tempers have flared because of the hot weather, but we hope that here in Mauldin, everybody stays calm, everybody stays cool. We thank you so much for allowing us to get together and to create a city that we hope is pleasing in your sight. Thank you for the people that you put in our paths along the way so that we can help each other. We thank you for the opportunity to listen to each other, to hear what each other has to say, and hopefully take that with us as we leave here tonight. Lord, we ask that you keep us all safe, all of our employees, all of our council members, our friends, our families, our community, Lord. We just ask that you keep your protective hand over us. These things we ask in your name. Amen. This time, I'd ask everybody who would like to please stand for the pledge.
Thank you, Mr. Matney. Proclamations and presentations, we don't have any before us this evening. The next item on the agenda is reading and approval of the minutes from the city council meeting of June 19th, 2023. Those minutes have been in your council packet that you've had since last Thursday or Friday. Is there any comments, adjustments, corrections, additions need to be made? What you see before you? Here none, I would ask that for unanimous consent, we accept the meetings as submitted. If there's any objections, so state. Here none, we'll accept the minutes as submitted for June 19th, 2023 by unanimous consent. Thank you. Next item before us is public comment. Ms. Miller, anyone signed? No one has signed up for that either. Anyone via Zoom? All right. Next item before us is a report from our city administrator, Mr. Duncan.
Get over here onto the microphone a little bit better. There we go. Would you see if you can? Thank you. Okay, fiscal year 2023 has come to a close as of June 30th. I'm pleased to report that the preliminary financial picture reflects revenues coming in strong, especially for property taxes, business license, and permits. Over the next few weeks, our finance team will continue to receive revenues, and they will be rolled back into the prior fiscal year as we also prepare for our fiscal 23 year audit. Also, likewise, revenues accruals for our expenditures are still ongoing, and our expenditures are relatively in line for fiscal year 2023. Total expenditures for the last fiscal year are currently under the budgeted amount for the general fund. Staff is working diligently on processing items as quickly as possible in order to have a more accurate year-end number to report. We will have unaudited amounts to report to council for all funds in August. But things are looking really good. Second off, I wanted to mention that although summer's almost over, we still have 2 more concerts for Amped Up Friday in the next couple weeks. This Friday night's concert will feature the Entertainers, and then next Friday, the Cantalinas will close out our concert series with a bang, as we will have our annual fireworks after dark, fireworks show after dark. We invite all of the community to join us at the amphitheater starting at 7 p.m. both nights. And then lastly, staff learned this last week that the city was recognized for our annual comprehensive financial report for fiscal year 2022. The certificate of achievement is the highest form of recognition in governmental accounting and financial reporting, and its attainment presents a significant accomplishment by government and its management. Congratulations to all those involved, but especially our amazingly talented financial department directed by Ms. Holly Abercrombie. Great job to everyone there.
Let the records reflect, she smiled. Thank you, Mr. Knight. Next item, report from standing committees. First and foremost, Finance and Policy, Mr. Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Duncan already applauded Ms. Abercrombie for the one thing I had to point in there. So I'll just second what Mr. Duncan said, as well as mention that as Mr. Duncan said, last year's books have just closed up. So we are doing quite well in this fiscal year so far. We're also 17 days in. So other than that, all is well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Sir, Public Safety, Ms. King.
Nothing to report at this time, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Public Works, Mr. Crayling.
Only thing is, I just wanted to state, in looking at the, curbs that have been added, to some of the streets to help with some of the stormwater, and they're looking really pretty good. If you haven't seen them, take a look. I hope that'll help some of our stormwater issues, fix them, but make things a little better. They're not, that's it.
Sir. Economic Planning and Development, Mr. Matney.
We're good, Mayor. Thanks.
Sir, Building Codes, Ms. Kuzner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just want to report that the permitting was at a record high in June for permits.
Continuing to March. Thank you, ma'am. Recreation, Mr. Allgood.
Thank you, Mayor. We have football starting at the end of this month, and I'm going to give Mr. Cumberlander a glance and say, I think we are still looking for a sports, for a senior center administrator. Right. Okay, so we are still doing interviews for a senior center administrator. That is all I have to report.
Thank you, Mr. Allgood. Next item, unfinished business, second readings, Ms. Miller.
We have one ordinance for second reading tonight, and this is ordinance 1019, establishing a sewer pump station fee for additional parcels of the Indigo Point development and for certain properties near and adjacent to the Indigo Point development and other matters related thereto.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. I believe that's out of finance. Mr. Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a motion that we approve the ordinance to establish a sewer pump station fee on the additional parcels at Indigo Point subdivision. If you look in your packet, Exhibit A will define the rest of the plat numbers that will be added to the ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. He has a motion to approve an ordinance establishing the pump station fee. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Ms. King. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion to approve an ordinance on second reading to establish a pump station fee on the additional parcels at Indigo Point subdivision and those properties close by, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Hearing none, the motion carries unanimous. Okay. Ms. Miller, first reading, I believe.
First reading ordinance tonight is ordinance 1020. It's a business license incentive program ordinance change. And it's an amendment to Chapter 10, Article 2, Section 53, Business License Fee Abatement Incentive Program to encourage and incentivize private capital investment, corporate and regional headquarters within the city, and to authorize alternative abatement incentive programs for economic development projects.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. I believe this is coming under Economic Community Development. Mr. Matney.
Yes, Mayor. Move that we approve this on first reading.
A motion for Mr. Matney to approve on first reading the amendment. Is there a second?
Second.
Second for Mr. Allgood. Is there any discussion? Mr. Matney.
Yes, Mayor. I'd actually like to offer an amendment to the ordinance as presented. It is a strike and insert in Section A, definitions, number 5, striking the definition of corporate and regional headquarters and replacing it with wording that says corporate headquarters shall mean the facility or portion of a facility where corporate staff, employees are physically employed and where the majority of the company's financial, personal, legal, planning, or other headquarters related functions are handled either on a regional or national basis.
All right. That's a form of amendment to the motion to amend. All right, so Mr. Manning has an amendment before us as read for section 53, 10-53, subsection A5. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Allgood? Okay, I have a second from Mr. Allgood. Is there any discussion about the amendment, strike and insert? Mr. Matney?
Thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to explain the amendment. The wording as it's currently in the ordinance, can be considered a little muddy. What I'm offering here in the form of this amendment is actually the definition of corporate headquarters that is used by the South Carolina Department of Revenue. So this would allow us to keep consistency with state definitions, and not have to worry, about anything to the contrary.
Thank you, Mr. Matney. And I believe the abatement incentive program we're talking about actually came out of approval by City Council of March the 17th, 2014. All we're doing is amending the section on the corporate side. Just background information that this abatement program actually started in 2014, March of 2014. Any discussion? Ms. King?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I like the amendment. I like that we're being consistent with the state definition. My only comment and question for perhaps further discussion is I just feel like we need to include that the headquarters must have responsibility for an area in South Carolina. I just think that the definition needs to include something pertaining to South Carolina. If it's DOR's definition, then perhaps they're making the assumption, which we know what that means, that everyone's reading it knowing that that could or could not be located in South Carolina. So I don't know, just food for thought. And I'm not sure if, it just seems to me like that needs to be added. And perhaps not even the headquarters, just physical presence, just in the state.
You mean bricks and mortar?
Well, are they going to have to be registered as a corporation in the state of South Carolina, or can it be a foreign entity registered in the state of South Carolina? I mean, I just think it needs to have a little bit more clear definition.
If I remember correctly, this is just a definition of if I'm reading this correctly, please. This is a definition of a headquarters. I believe other parts of the manual basically identifies that it be in South Carolina. I think this is just the definition. Correct, Mr. Madden?
That has been my understanding.
Legal, as far as the fact that this ordinance is from 2014 and we're just amending the corporate headquarters, is there any reason that it needs to be stated that it's headquarters within the state of South Carolina? I don't know how they could be. in the state of
Mr. Mayor,
Legal.
can I clarify that, going back to the committee meeting? Prior to the amendment in the committee meeting, they were wanting to strike the last part of the sentence that the headquarters must have responsibility for an area, including South Carolina and 2 other states. So the original recommendation was to strike 2 other states. But now we're just leaving the entire sentence out. It's not even identifying anything to do with our state, which I guess maybe it's not even relevant.
I'd like to offer a little bit of hopefully some clarity on that. I don't believe too many of the other definitions actually stipulate South Carolina. I think this being the definitions section, it's just stipulating what the phrase corporate headquarters means versus the implication of where it is. I think that goes back into the beginning paragraph where it says the city offers business license fee abate to incentive and encourage private capital investment, et cetera. So the intent is to say, well, these are the entities that would be qualified, but then they also obviously have to locate inside the city to qualify. Because if they're in Charleston, they won't qualify for our program.
Mr. Madden.
Thank you, Mayor. And just to add to that, the other piece of the amendment language that's under Section 2C abatement, is the insertion of a clause that says notwithstanding the preceding criteria, the Mauldin City Council may negotiate alternative incentive agreements for economic development projects, which still puts the authority and responsibility of any of those incentives in this council's hands.
I guess what I'm looking at is this is an ordinance that on page 25, it states this is state of South Carolina, county of Greenville, and then it talks about Mauldin. So I guess I don't know that it's relevant, and that's what our legal counsel was advising me of, the fact that it really is stated that we're in the community of city of Mauldin, so we're good to go. Unless we wanted to consider in section 1053 where it says opportunities in the community, insert the word Mauldin community, but it's actually headed up in the ordinance header. So don't think it would be totally necessary. We certainly can't pass an ordinance for the Spartanburg County.
Well, I guess my thought process again was and I don't guess it matters, but is it a corporate charter that's registered in South Carolina or a foreign entity operating in South Carolina? But at the end of the day, it's going to come back to this council to approve any incentive. So I'm good with it. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, all right, well, I defer to your professional vocation to know that those little things do matter. Okay, any other discussion? Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is probably more for legal as well. So by adding within this, notwithstanding the preceding criteria, the Mauldin City Council may negotiate alternative incentives. I think it's always been my understanding that we should not have a lot of leeway there. So when we put an ordinance in place for anything, it's black and white. It keeps the negotiability of us out of it. It keeps us from being able to take advantage of either our position or a position of a friend or anything like that. Does that help or hinder with that?
Well, economic development in your state, you have a lot of discretion. For example, we approved one right now, development with a lot of incentives that council approved. And go back to what the mayor said. If you look at the first sentence of 1053, it refers to something in the community referencing Mauldin. But also the ordinance itself talks about it. You're not going to approve an incentive for something that's not in this community that benefits this community. Because each incentive stands on its own merits for a particular business. And then the subcommittee decide if you want to create an incentive to entice them to come here or not. You don't have to. So to me, it's adequately covered in here. And go back to what Mr. Matley said. What you're actually doing is redefining what a corporate headquarters means. The rest of these issues are addressed in other parts of the ordinance and what already pre-exists from 2014. So I think the concerns you have are related, but there are certain things, Mr. Reynolds, where you all have a lot of discretion. And one of them is economic development. But if you have a personal connection to a business, then the ethical issue about recusing yourself from voting is relevant to a particular council member when that occurs. I know Mr. Matten on several occasions is recused where something involved the business that he was doing business with. So he recused himself. So that's the way you would deal with an individual concerned about a possible incentive for a business moving into Mauldin, if there was some direct conflict. Sure, each council member did the right thing in terms of the ethical requirements for each. But I'm satisfied that between the purpose of this ordinance is to change, clarify the definition, what is referenced by corporate headquarters or regional headquarters, et cetera, or which you have the right to consider it. And that's really the sole purpose of this particular ordinance. Remainder, I think, is addressed in other places in the preceding ordinance that already exists.
I'd also interject same thing. On the original 2014, in the section, there's 10, the Director of Business and Development Services shall be responsible for the interpretation and application of the business license abatement program. So it's pretty much his call, and we're really not in the end of the agreement. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, Mr. Duggan, you took a long time to say exactly what I wanted you to say. And that was that there's a lot of that the state gives us some discretion, especially in economic development. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
One of the things Mr. Reynolds can do that I've learned in church a long time ago, when you feel this long-winded, put that left arm up and turn it.
What I did want to point out, now I'm sure my colleague over there shot his hand up pretty quickly, but what I did want to have, I think more publicly, is, hey, there's a lot of discretion within councils, especially within municipalities to try to grow economic development in a way that suits them. And that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Madden.
Thank you, Mayor. I understand your concern about the language about Director of Business Development Services. And as a reminder, we can do amendments on second reading. So I would say that if we get through first reading tonight, that I would urge anybody who has amendments that they would like to offer to be prepared to present those at second reading. That being said, again, Mayor, I understand your point, but it takes us then back to the piece under abatement that we would add in, notwithstanding the preceding criteria. The Mauldin City Council may negotiate alternative incentive agreements for economic development projects. And that puts us squarely within the responsibility, no matter what staff may say. Ultimately, it is this council that will decide yes or no on what those incentives are. And I'd like to address Mr. Reynolds' initial concerns for just a second, if I could. And, I generally tell my clients, if you've got the vote, shut up, but I'm not going to take my own advice. Mr. Reynolds, one of the reasons that we're looking at this, and you actually hit the nail on the head a minute ago, is that there are cities around us that are constantly competing for businesses to locate into their area. And your initial concern about not having that wiggle room, I think, is actually what would put us at a competitive disadvantage, is that we already have our hands bound. And state law really gives counties the majority of the power when it comes to offering economic development incentives. So if there is a way for us as a city to do exactly what you said, which is tailor incentives that would be right for our city, I think that it would be wise for us to take advantage of that. So I appreciate your initial concern, and I appreciate what you said about making sure that we tailor it to what is uniquely Mauldin. And I think that that's what we're trying to do here. And now I will shut.
Well, now I changed my mind.
Thank you, Mr. Madden. I recognize legal again.
Remember that state law puts the burden of being in control of expenditure of public funds on you, elected officials, not staff. And so you can give them discretion to spend some money on their department with control. But this would be something that's outside your ordinary annually approved budget. So not only would you have to approve the incentive, because that's your legal duty, but you're going to have to address that in your budget if it occurs during the fiscal year after you've approved your budget. You got to amend your budget to allocate some funds for that incentive. So remember, the stops with you with respect to the expenditure of public funds. So, that is addressed in the law and in the way you all forecast your budget every year.
Thank you, Mr. Dugan. Any other questions, comments? All right, so the vote is for the amendment to strike and insert the definition of a corporate headquarters in 1053A5. That's what's before us right now as an amendment. All those in favor of the amendment say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Hearing none, the amendment carries. Now back to the main motion to amend the business license fee abatement incentive program as amended as the definition of corporate headquarters in 1053A5. Any discussion on that point? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Hearing none, the motion carries as amended. Thank you, Mr. Matney. Next item before us, back to you, Ms. Miller.
Final ordinance for tonight is ordinance 1021, an ordinance to provide for the annexation of property owned by Charles Michael Hendricks and located at 2114 and 2118 Standing Springs Road, tax map parcels 0583.02-01-009.02 and 0583.02-01-009.03 by 100% petition method and to establish a zoning classification of R10 residential for said property.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Miller. I believe that's coming out of BDS. Ms. Kuzner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd also like to state that the applicant is proposing to reduce the number of homes in the section 2 and section 3 from 351 detached single-family homes to 347 single-family homes. So at this time, I'd like to make a motion to approve this annexation and the requested rezoning to R10 residential from the county.
I have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Allgood. Any discussion? Hear none, all those in favor of the motion to approve the annexation and the subsequent rezoning for the above mentioned parcels on first reading, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign.
Sure.
Hear none, the motion carries on first reading unanimous. Okay, next item before us is standing committee items, indigent defense contract, public safety. Ms. King.
Easy for you to say, right?
Yeah, it was.
That's a tricky one. What you have in your packet is pretty self-explanatory. The financial impact is $10,000, which has already been included and approved in our 23-24 budget. So I'll make the motion to approve the service agreement with the 13th Circuit Public Defender's Office for representation of indigent defendants in Mauldin Municipal Court for the 23-24 fiscal year.
Motion before us. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, from Mr. Crayling. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion to approve the service agreement with the 13th Circuit Public Defender's Office, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Hearing none, the motion carries unanimous. Okay, next item is the Golden Strip Career Center SRO, Ms. King.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is an additional resource officer, which this council and councils of past have worked really hard to have a school resource officer at all of our schools located within our city limits. So this agreement will fulfill that what once upon a time was just a want. Now we have it. So I'll make the motion to approve the amended agreement for school resource officer to, include the one grant position for the, Golden Strip.
Ms. King, the motion before us, is there a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Matney emphatically.
As I said, we've been working on this.
Yes. And, appreciate the hard efforts by not only public safety, and our staff, city administrator and our police chief for getting on this as soon as the funds became available through the governor in his office. So that was one of his pledges to us. Thank you for that. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion to approve an amended agreement for the SRO with the Greenville County to add one additional SRO position to current agreement, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Matty, you voted? Okay, I didn't hear him. Aye.
Aye.
Got it. Those opposed, like sign. Hearing none, all. It carries unanimous. I back myself up sometimes. All right. Next item is the appointment to the Planning Commission coming out of BDS, Ms. Kuzner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to make a motion to reappoint, Raj Reddy to the Planning Commission.
We have a motion, Ms. Kuzner. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Allgood, I believe I heard first. Okay, any discussion? All those in favor of the motion to approve the recommendation of Mr. Redding to the Planning Commission, seat 2, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Hearing none, the motion carries unanimous. All right, next item before us is the resolution to sale of fixed assets. Mr. Kraling.
This time I'd like to make a motion to, the council to approve the sale of old and damaged, equipment, listed in their package, through government, deals website.
Motion before us, is there a second?
Second.
Second from Ms. King. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion to approve the sale of the items to be listed on government deal within 30 days in your packet, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Hearing none, the motion carries unanimous. Next item before us is a GLDTC 612.01 agreement, also coming out of Public Works. Mr. Kraling.
So I'd like to, make a motion, city council approve the GLTDC participation agreement, for repaving of the city roadways inventory.
Okay, have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Allgood. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion to approve the GLTDC participation agreement for the repaving of the city's roadway inventory, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Hearing none, the motion carries unanimous. The next item before us is janitorial service contract, also from Public Works. Mr. Kraling.
Like to make a motion, that city council approve the contract with Service Master Clean, for a contract for $4,705 per month of public department, with Public Works Department for, janitorial services.
Okay, I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Ms. King. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion to approve the contract with Service Master Clean, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Hearing none, the motion carries unanimous. Thank you, council. We're now back to public comment. Anyone via Zoom? Whatsoever, no one signed up, so we'll move right along with there. Council concerns. If y'all would allow me a personal note, ask your continued thoughts and prayers for, the passing of Reverend Pastor Waddy Talley, his family Janie, his son Waddy Jr., and his son Joseph, along with the extended family, Martha and all that. need to continue to hear our prayers and thoughts and assist us with them as they adjust. Those of you who knew the man I affectionately call Reverend, had a demeanor about him. It was just level. And as y'all know, in my past history, I've been known to be passionate about things when they come up or get before us. And the Reverend was always would meet me at the sports center and talk about it. He would listen patiently. And then he would say, yeah, I understand. I see it. Yep, yep. Let me ask you if you think about this, all in one level thing. And just a beautiful smile and demeanor about him, and sudden passing caught all of us by surprise. So keep Janie and family in your prayers, if you would, in your thoughts as they make the adjustment now and move forward. Thank you. Anyone else? Hearing none, what the council's pleasure of adjournment?
So moved.
Mr. Matney.
Second.
Ms. King. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned at 7:39.